The story began in 2009, to be precise, on the border of Suriname, United States of America. This is Kang In-gu, the main character in this movie, and he is a businessman who has to work hard because he was abandoned by his parents when he was a kid. He must bear the burden of caring for his 2 younger siblings. Kang In-gu went to Suriname not only for business, but he was given an important task to find out information on the world's largest drug dealer in Suriname. Is Kang In-gu able to complete his difficult job there? Let's just go straight into the storyline of the movie. The movie opens with a story in the past. In 1968, during the Vietnam War, his father was given a 5-year assignment there until his father returned from the war with a limp. Then, when Kang In-gu was a teenager, he decided to practice martial arts because it allowed him to go to school and eat for free. At that time, someone called him by saying that his mother had died while delivering drinks and was found 3 hours after falling. Kang In-gu, who was 14 years old at that time, had to accept the fact that now his mother is gone and he also has to support his 2 younger siblings along with his father, who every day only eats simple food and drinks. Here his father works to send a cement, but when his father passed out while driving his car, he had to. With these 2 incidents, Kang In-gu and his 2 younger siblings were devastated because his mother and father has been passed away, and absolutely Kang In-gu now has to bear the burden of his father's debts, which are so many, by working any way to earn money. At home, Kang In-gu could not take care of his 2 younger siblings because he was busy at work, so he had to use his own method, namely contacting a woman who liked him to say directly that he wanted to marry her. But because the woman demanded a lot of In-gu about house and money, he also decided to end the relationship. But one of the other women was willing to come to his house, her named Hygiene. Shortly, they finally got married in the church, and absolutely, because this made things better at home, they were blessed with 2 very cute children. But problems returned because the money that In-gu got wasn't enough for all of them until he learned to repair cars and open a repair shop in front of the United States Army base. Time passed until he was assisted by his judo martial arts senior to learn English and was able to work to deliver food supplies to the United States Army base. It turned out that In-gu, who only worked as a waiter, and now become a manager at a karaoke place and took over the place. With his hard work, In-gu's life began to change. How lucky In-gu is because his business now considered successful in his job and educating his children because his first child is very smart. In-gu really wants this life, but he doesn't know how long this life will going well. Problems come every day starting at karaoke place, and In-gu no longer has much time with his 2 children. Now In-gu has to think that he can enjoy life with his family and doesn't want his 2 children to experience the same thing as him when he was a kid. The next day, In-gu's friend came from abroad and gave him a few gifts. This is where In-gu told his friends about their respective experiences from when they were kids until now. In-gu's current job is not enough for his family because he has to spend his time making money, not enjoying his life with his family, until it ends with a death. Absolutely, In-gu cannot enjoy everything. Then his friend said that this stingray was very difficult to find because import costs from Chile were very expensive, and his friend named Yunsu told In-gu to send the stingray to him for free, because he knew there were countries that didn't eat stingrays and just throw them away. That country is in the United States, in Suriname to be precise, until he shows a video that the country is full of stingrays and they don't like it. The plan begins by bringing all the stingrays into Korea and inviting In-gu to come with him. Upon arriving home, In-gu asks Hygiene for permission to be allowed to go to Suriname to do his stingray business. At first, he didn't believe it, but after he found out it was true that in Suriname stingrays are not consumed but just thrown away, because the opportunities are huge, and In-gu is sure that this will all work and be very profitable. Hearing all that, Hygiene only said that In-gu should be more grateful. Hygiene prefers to live in poverty rather than being a person who has everything. In the evening, when Kang In-gu was busy to do a gambling with his friend, he was surprised by a problem which turned out to be in one of his karaoke rooms. There were 2 people who were looking for trouble with him. In-gu asked for compensation money, 2 million won, and threatens to call the police, and unfortunately they are both police. And In-gu is threatened again about his karaoke place not having a license because it employs underage women, because he doesn't want this problem to be continue. In-gu give them some money. Shortly, In-gu finally decided to go to Suriname, and there, Yunsu also picked him up. It's been 30 years since this country's independence, and the population here is still not much. Because of that, there are so many foreigners who are here. In-gu, who hears all this, feels unsure that Yunsu can run his business in Suriname. After arriving at a place, Yunsu shows how many stingrays he has. That clearly makes In-gu feel that his business will run very well. Shortly after, Hygiene calls to ask how In-gu is there. Hygiene allows In-gu to go if he has to always go to church every week, and gives Hygiene a photo. Then at their stingray factory, In-gu is surprised by the arrival of the military, who know that the 2 of them are running a business and ask him to work together. With his experience, he also talked to the military leader. Ingu said that he had just started this business and still didn't make any money. Then Ingu also promised that if later this stingray arrived in Korea, then he would give money to him. The military leader only said that he asked to be paid $2,000 for a month. Here Ingu emphasized again if he can bring lots of fish to Korea, then he will give $2,500 every month, and if the shipment is small, then he will give money as much as $1,000. Finally, they both can work together according to the agreement. The first step, where Ingu is immediately given a board stating that the place is protected by the Surinamese army. Seeing this, Young-soo is very amazed because of Ingu's business experience, and suddenly Ingu is called by Mr. Shin, who wants 500 kg of the stingrays next week at such an attractive price. Young-soo is furious that their stock is limited, but Ingu says that Mr. Shin dares to pay 8,000 won for each kilo. Then it is shown that Young-soo is so happy that he falls because some people hit him, and they find out that Ingu and Young-soo are running a stingray business in Suriname. Someone claims that Suriname's sea is belonged to him and asked for $5,000 for each fish that Ingu took. Ingu, who didn't want to cooperate with that person, then he did this. Then Ingu doesn't want to give $5,000 to that person for free. Ingu also makes an offer to him. If Ingu gives $5,000 to him, then he doesn't have any more money. It becomes a business is doomed to failure for both of them, and Ingu asks for relief from the amount. But unfortunately the man doesn't want an offer and threatens that if they don't give the money, it will put their lives in danger. In the morning, Ingu was already at a church called Paramaribo, and he didn't forget to give his photo to hygiene. Furthermore, after getting an information that Ingu and Young-soo were tasked with taking stingrays and selling them to Korea, the pastor was very interested in this business. The pastor also knew that the two of them were in trouble because their faces were already battered. The pastor was curious about what problem they were facing, and Young-soo finally said that several Chinese people admitted that they are the owner of the Suriname Sea and they had to pay for everything, while he had also paid the military, but the military only served on land. Hearing that thing, the pastor also knew that the Chinese man had long hair and bad body odor. He was a gang of gangsters led by Chinjin. He was known as a devil who could kill someone just for money. Here the pastor knew that this plan came because of God's permission, and he had to help them to finish everything. Quickly the pastor called someone whose purpose was that they had to go to the place of worship in Chinatown. Furthermore, the pastor along with Ingu and Young-soo arrived at a restaurant. So many people seemed uncomfortable with his arrival, and it turned out that the pastor met the chairman of the gangster, who said that the stingrays in the Sea of Suriname belonged to God, and Ingu was someone who was ordered by God to come here to catch the fish. If he tries to annoy him, it's the same as against God's orders. Hearing that, Chinjin just does according to the rules, but this pastor threatens him again. Here this pastor just wanted to make peace with Chinjin, didn't want to bring up this matter by bringing up God's name. Chinzen also said that the stingray would be given to him and the problem was solved so easily. But suddenly, Chinjin gave a gift, which is that as a drink to him so they can enjoy the moment. That incident made Young-soo and Ingu feel attracted to the pastor. The pastor is very influential in Suriname. Then the next step is that the two of them will give fresh stingrays with the direction of ginseng to the pastor to make it easier for them to find information. But Young-soo doubts it because pastors don't drink the alcohol. At night, Ingu woke up with the sound of the phone, and it was a call from the captain of the ship, who said that he had an infection if it turns out that in his stingray there is cocaine, which is a type of drug. A big mass is already waiting for them both. Ingu told Young-soo goes to the jurisdiction office to find out what's going on, and Ingu is about to call Pastor Yo-hwan because he is very close to the president. Maybe this will help him. After getting all the information from Ingu, Pastor Yo-hwan told him not to be panicked because he would find a solution. Pastor Yo-hwan quickly called someone, and suddenly several policemen visited Ingu's place to arrest him. Then it was shown Ingu, who was at the police station. The military leader came to Ingu's detention room. Ingu then said that he had never touched drugs, he was just a businessman, but the military leader only said that Ingu will be transferred to St. Martin prison and will be tried. Then the military orders his men to take Ingu to go to that place. When he arrived at the prison, Ingu asked for a warden's phone, but the warden didn't allow it because Ingu was a prisoner of drug cases. Then Ingu didn't run out of ideas. He said that his wallet was taken by another prisoner with as much as $200. Then Ingu bribes the warden with a lot of money. If he can use the phone right now, Ingu has to patiently explain to Hyejin about her current problems, and she has to believe that her husband was only framed by someone. Finally, Hyejin was going to find a lawyer and appeal the case, but the problem is that hiring a lawyer is not cheap. She has to give up her house for sale. This is clearly forbidden by Ingu, won't allow it, and he will find another way. Then in the detention cell, Ingu felt sad and he could only see a picture of his family until the warden came to collect the money that Ingu had promised, because at this time he was being visited by someone. That person was a working person at the National Intelligence Service. That person told Ingu to be like a friend, even though Ingu didn't know him. This person is Choi Chan-ho. It seems Choi Chan-ho already knows what case In-gu is going through, and his purpose came to meet In-gu is to save him. Chan-ho said, "Is In-gu know Pastor Yo-hwan?" And it turns out that it was Pastor Yo-hwan who got In-gu into this trouble. Yo-hwan is a dealer who controls 60% of drug distribution in Europe, and he can also be called the king of cocaine in Suriname. Furthermore, Chan-ho told that during the 90s in Ikkean, it was seen that there was a large-scale operation to catch the kingpin of crystal methamphetamine smugglers in Ikkean. Finally, the police only managed to catch all of them, but not the leader who took away 10 kilos of methamphetamine. He is named Yo-hwan. Even though the police know where he fled, he has to be willing to run and crawl as far as 14 kilometers through the ditches, and Yo-hwan is still selling methamphetamine until this story continues. 3 years ago, when Yo-hwan put a narcotic drug into the drink, which at that time there was a geode construction investment contract fraud, the invited guests who drank it were affected and could not report the incident because they had also consumed methamphetamine, even though the contract didn't work. But the invited guests kept looking for Yo-hwan to buy methamphetamine because they were addicted, and it was proven that the guests were important. They came one by one to him to ask for water that he had previously given in exchange for a savings book. Suddenly both of them were surprised by the arrival of the National Security Intelligence Service, and Yo-hwan finally arrested. In the interrogation room, Yo-hwan was beaten without mercy. It seemed that Chan-ho was telling, Yo-hwan was freed and used another method by becoming a pastor in a church. With his followers, who were already a lot, he got coffers of money, but it turned out to be one of the people who working at the National Security Intelligence Agency is treasonous and instead employs Yo-hwan for a buck. Once a month he always visits Yo-hwan's place just to collect tribute, but this time Yo-hwan is planning something different. Because of this incident, Yo-hwan decided not to live in Korea anymore and would go to a small country that not many Koreans know about. Here Yo-hwan decides to go to Suriname, where the country is an unstable country because of the many coups of the drug gangster military and the corrupt government. Finally, General Delano is the person who has power in the military coup, and that is the victim wanted by Yo-hwan. In order to gain power in the country of Suriname, they also work together in this situation. Delano will become president, and Yo-hwan is given the exclusive right to manage cocaine in the country of Suriname, and from there, Yo-hwan's business also develops between countries. Furthermore, Yo-hwan also developed his business by smuggling drugs in women's stomachs, and the men were trained to shoot. This was clearly done by Yo-hwan in the same way, by putting methamphetamine into their drinks, which made them always want to get these drinks from Yo-hwan. The point is, at this time In-gu was framed by Yo-hwan because he put cocaine into his Stingray, because Yo-hwan only wanted to test the European route that In-gu passed. Is it safe or not? Then In-gu asked where his friend was, and Chan-ho gave him a recording on his phone that Young-soo was already in Chinatown, and found out that Yo-hwan was a drug dealer, and In-gu had to swallow the bitter pill if Young-soo was killed by Yo-hwan's gang. Here, Chan-ho asks In-gu for help to solve this problem by luring Yo-hwan to another country, then arresting him in the United States, because there are very strict regulations regarding drugs. If Yo-hwan sends goods go to the United States, then the United States itself will let it go. He will send everyone to come to Suriname, and Chan-ho tells In-gu to come back to Yo-hwan and convince him to sell cocaine to the United States, and of course Chan-ho's agents will continue to protect In-gu from a distance. Chan-ho also promises that if In-gu catches Yo-hwan, then all of In-gu's charges will be dropped. Only In-gu is their hope now, but In-gu says that he has already lost 500 million won in this country. That much money should be for his children. In-gu loudly says if Chan-ho wants to asking for his help, then he has to pay 500 million won to him. The first step, In-gu has to know there is Yo-hwan's bodyguard who is Nigerian, and he is told to distribute drugs in prison with the help of the warden. For now, In-gu's plan is working and already has many members. Suddenly he has to fight with other prisoners because he has been selling drugs in their area. From this incident, Yo-hwan's personal bodyguard is attracted to In-gu. Then several months pass until In-gu is free and is picked up by Chan-ho. Then Chan-ho took In-gu somewhere and introduced his female co-worker. Then Chan-ho also reminded him that his 200 million won would be sent every month for 10 months to In-gu's wife's account, but In-gu asked 40 million for 5 months that Chan-ho has to pay him, and Chan-ho will give some of that money to Young-soo's family. The second plan started with a plan so that Yo-hwan could send cocaine to the United States, but before that, In-gu explained that Yo-hwan currently didn't have much money and it was difficult to bring his goods to Korea. Then gangster leader Chinzen also does the same thing, but Chinzen only sends methamphetamine to Chinatown in Europe. That In-gu will do even though the success rate is very small to get close to Chinzen and Yo-hwan. The second plan also started with a plan so that Yo-hwan could send cocaine to the United States, but before that, In-gu explained about his plan, namely to invite Chinzen to do big business, but not methamphetamine. but he had to violate the rule is to sell cocaine in Suriname. That is clearly not allowed in Suriname, and this is where Yohan's group will be provoked, and then the next plan will be Ngu starting back. Do not forget that Ngu gave news to his wife if he was going to Suriname because there was someone who needed his help, so he could research a book, and at this time Hygiene was asked to trust him if he would live in Suriname for 5 months. In a short time, Ngu had arrived at his destination, but from a distance it seemed that someone was following him. When he arrived at the casino, Ngu asked that he could meet the boss of the casino owner. Without any far, Ngu immediately met the boss named Shenzhen. He was the head of an organization from China that was well known in Suriname, but since Yohan's arrival, his position was shifted. Ngu offered him money only to avenge all Yohan's did so far. At first Shenzhen refused, but Ngu's offer was successful. Shenzhen invited him to play cards with Ngu's initial plan chat to be able to sell drugs to Korea, and Ngu asked for a piece of cocaine, but Shenzhen offered that methamphetamine is better in Korea. But Ngu still wants cocaine, and not methamphetamine, and we know Ngu have 1 ton of cocaine and a gun. Shortly, Ngu immediately gave the information to Chonho, then Shenzhen asked for time to prepare everything. Then Ngu came to his old workplace in Suriname. In this place he saw Yunsu's book and found a photo of his family. Then not long after, Shenzhen called him. Quickly Ngu immediately headed to the location, but here he realized that he was being followed by someone, that person named Bayan Kite. He was Yohan's confidant. Then after arriving at Chinatown, Ngu immediately followed members of Shenzhen and gave him 2 plastic of cocaine, not 1 ton, because Shenzhen still didn't trust Ngu at this time, and suddenly outside the headquarters, Shenzhen is attacked by Yohan's group, which is chaired by David Park. He is a lawyer who protects the drug lord, Yohan. It turned out that David Pak came because Shenzhen had committed an offense, namely selling cocaine, which he should only have been allowed to sell methamphetamine. Here David Park also invites Ngu because Pastor Yohan will meet him, but Shenzhen forbids and Ngu has to decide who he wants to go with, Yohan or him. Ngu asks for time so he can talk to Yohan's group. Arriving at Yohan's house, he was immediately greeted by him and immediately asked what his purpose was to return to Suriname. Ngu only replied that he wanted to make money, and Yohan reiterated what is Ngu's purpose come to Suriname. Yohan actually invites Ngu into his house and says why did Yohan kill Yunsu, but Yohan simply replies that this is God's plan. Then Ngu reassured that his purpose in coming to Suriname was to make money, because Suriname is famous for cocaine and he intends to sell it to Korea. It seems Yohan is interested in him, and Ngu says again that he has done a business with Shenzhen first. Then Yohan explained that Shenzhen only sells methamphetamine, not cocaine. Only Yohan can sell cocaine in large quantities in Suriname, not retail like Shenzhen, whose prices are far from Yohan. Ngu then called someone named Sangman, but actually it was Chonho, who we know this was their plan to frame Yohan. Ngu immediately gave his phone to Yohan to talk to Sangman, and Yohan immediately asked how Sangman could safely send goods to Suriname. Sangman explained that United States troops in Korea ate a lot of chicken meat. If Yohan filled the chickens with his goods, then the goods will reach Itaewon and Gangnam without being inspected by customs. Yohan didn't want to be deceived by him and asked to meet in person, but Sangman instead asked Yohan to come to his place in Brazil, but Yohan refused because there were a lot of church affairs at his place, and again he invites Sangman to come to Suriname until Yohan's invitation is agreed. Then at Chonho's place he immediately prepared everything to go to Suriname. Then Ngu called and said that Chonho had to be careful when he met him, especially in terms of clothing, because at this time he was in disguise become a businessman from the dark world. Shortly, Sangman arrived and he was immediately picked up by David there. After arriving at Yohan's house, Sangman met Ngu, who introduced Yohan to him. When the 4 of them talked about drug development in Korea, Yohan immediately said that cocaine was in very low demand in Korea, but Sangman only said that Koreans only get poor quality, and with Yohan's help they can develop cocaine shines in Korea, China, and Japan. And suddenly one member of Yohan shows Sangman's suspicious passport. Then Yohan decides to tell Sangman to rest for a while before this chat starts again. Outside, Yohan's group's suspicions were true and they were ready with what steps Yohan ordered. Meanwhile, inside, Yohan and his group entered Ngu and Sangman's room by asking if 2 years ago, was he already there? In Suriname? And that's true because at that time he was looking for cocaine and then came home empty-handed. But Yohan gave a paper that Sangman came to Suriname was to the United States Embassy, and Sangman said that there was an employee who traded in smuggling, so he asked the employee to look for cocaine. But he even tricked him because he only sold methamphetamine. That person was named Douglas Harper, but that Yohan didn't believe all those and made Sangman go to cancel everything. And suddenly, Yohan watches a baseball game saying that Chonho has very good abilities. Was Yohan knowing their disguises? Then Johan told David to look for Douglas Harper's name so he could prove their disguise. After meeting someone, David gave some money to find out who Douglas Harper was. Shortly, David, who had been waiting for a long time, finally received a warning from Johan that it would be better if all of this was cancelled, and ordered him to kill them both. Johan's plan begins by ordering Bayan Kite to immediately kill Ingu and Changho in the hotel. Then David finally got what he needed and immediately told Johan that Douglas Harper's name was on the list as someone who likes to smuggle things and has a lot of debt. That obviously made Johan call Bayan Kinte to immediately cancels his plans, and Ingu immediately makes an offer to Johan. Because of Johan's impolite attitude to Sangman, he immediately gave him 2 tons of cocaine and asked for 1 month's time because Sangman's requests were so many. Furthermore, after the deal was successful, Johan invited the two of them to have dinner together, and Ingu was still curious about who his agent International Intelligence Security was undercover in Johan's group. Here Johan asks Ingu to stay at his house as long as he prepares the cocaine requested by them, but Ingu here mocks Johan about the past events that had put him in prison until hurt Ingu and destroyed his stingray business. While in the bathroom, Changho reminded again that Johan would run out of money because he had bought 2 tons of cocaine from the state of Colombia, and that was their chance to catch him. But here, Ingu begins to realize that what really happened to his stingray business was because of International Intelligence Security, who knew that the stingray contained cocaine. Changho did that only to help his country. Because of the debate, Ingu began to suspect Changho for trapping him in this. In the morning, Changho and Ingu split up and started again with their next plan. Ingu came to Johan's house according to his invitation for dinner, and Ingu was given a room that was so luxurious that he found that the room had a tape recorder installed. Then from a distance, he saw a woman and a daughter who looked exactly like with Hygiene and his daughter, but after checking it was not Hygiene, but a group of women who were being given a drink, and suddenly Chinzen called her. But at this time Ingu just said that he would call him back. Then quickly Ingu told all that to Changho about a strange ritual place right behind Johan's house. There were also children who drank the water mixed with cocaine. And Changho just said that once again he apologized for everything that was going on with Ingu, and Changho would give Ingu a bonus if he successfully completed his mission. Then at the Suriname Air Base, there were David and Johan who were waiting for the arrival of their friend from Colombia carrying cocaine. In the evening, Ingu came to Chinatown just by himself to meet Chinzen, and suddenly Ingu was in big trouble. In a short time, Ingu was bound and met with Chinzen. He said that he had the exclusive right to sell cocaine to the Korean state, but Ingu even betrayed him. If he even did business with Johan, Ingu continues to persuade Chinzen not to kill him, because Ingu will soon kill Johan and Ingu's life will be at stake. Here Ingu is released and immediately contacts Changho if he has almost died being eaten by Chinzen's crocodile pet, and suddenly Johan's group came to pick him up. Cleverly, Ingu contacted Changho to find out Johan's location, but the signal was suddenly lost. Because he was taken to a certain place, the place where Johan was there, who told him that his goods had arrived. Furthermore, Johan also arranged the route to be passed through the Sapalawini River area to the Brazilian border, and Changho was asked to be prepared if the day after tomorrow Johan would tell where their meeting location was. Shortly, they all prepared it, but not Johan, who chose to go to church. He could only cheer them on, and the scene was seen when Ingu was at the Brazilian border with Johan's group. Now, Changho has got the coordinates for their meeting according to David's orders, and Changho asks his team to get ready to go to the Brazilian border and confiscate the goods. Arriving at the location, Johan's group immediately put all the items in and met Sangman, who immediately made a transaction, but suddenly, the Brazilian police came to surround them all. Then the scene shows the Ingu group being surrounded by the military from the Brazilian border. The military captain immediately asks for the money, and David only says that they are workers in a mine near the Brazilian border, but the captain doesn't believe him and checks the goods who were there. But Changho convinced the captain that if the captain needed the money, please just take it, with all the cocaine in the truck. In other words, they were released, but the Brazilian military confiscated the money and cocaine. But suddenly, next we return to Johan's headquarters. There he saw so many of his members who had died, and on the side, it turned out that this was indeed a plan from Changho, who only wanted to confiscate his money and cocaine. But suddenly Johan's troops came and changed all the plans that Changho had made. But because of that incident, they managed to tie up Johan's shipment by blocking the Brazil route, and for the next operation he was sure there would be no problem. Hearing that, Ingu now really doesn't trust the International Intelligence Security, mainly with Changho, because this mission is so dangerous that he almost died. Inside the house, Johan sees the news that the Brazilian government is going to declare war on drug trafficking in Suriname. Then trouble comes that all accounts connected to European banks have been cut off, or Johan's accounts have been blocked. This happened because one of Yohwan's members was arrested and asked for information about Yohwan's organization. Here, Yohwan really sure that one of his members has betrayed him, and suddenly Ingu comes by asking if Sangman asks who will be responsible for this incident, because all of these plans are arranged by Yohwan's group and he almost lost their lives and 20 billion won in cash. Until they can sue international trade law, Yohwan asks for time so he can find who betrayed his group. But Ingu doesn't want to do business anymore with him, and Yohwan are now influenced by Ingu, if all this is did by Shenzhen. While in Yohwan's group there is still someone who has worked at Shenzhen, namely Bayan Kite. Then Yohwan finally, not wanting to fail his business with Sangman, Yohwan invites Ingu to go around by thanking Ingu for bringing 100 kilos of cocaine, and Yohwan invites him tomorrow to a place with neat clothes. The next day, Ingu was with Yohwan and arrived at the Suriname presidential palace. Inside, he meets with President Delano. Then Yohwan introduces Ingu that he is a big businessman in Korea, namely having entertainment for the United States Army in Korea. It turns out that Yohwan asked Delano for help, that Mr. Ingu would open a new market in Suriname and was ready to do business with them. After the meeting, Yohwan says that Delano had been detained in the same prison as Ingu because of a drug case. Hearing this, Ingu only said why Yohwan brought him together with the president. Yohwan only said that this was a vision, we wanted to make as much money as possible, until Yohwan decided to find out who the person who had betrayed him, before Yohwan would invite Ingu to work with him. Furthermore, Yohwan took Ingu to a place that was quite suspicious, and that was the place where Yohwan planted cocaine because he no longer wanted to depend on Colombia, and Yohwan promised Ingu that if this business went well, he would give the position of general director to Ingu, and also every month Ingu will be given 100 billion won. Suddenly Sangman gives the news that he is very angry and will stop this business with him, but Yohwan here gives the right to Ingu to determine the best route to Korea so that his business will run very well. Here Chang-ho emphasizes that Ingu carries out the next plan but does not want to carry out the plan, because he is currently only given the trust by Yohwan and hoping Chang-ho will have to be patient with all of what he will do. After reuniting with Yohwan, he is finally convincing Sangman, and he will find the best route to Korea. Then we move on to the DEA headquarters in Virginia. There we see Chang-ho giving a plan to the police. If he wants to arrest Yohwan, they can get information from the distribution route and prepare to fight with the cartel group. Then the plan that Chang-ho made is if Yohwan is doing trade on United States territory, and that's when they can send DEA troops to Suriname to catch him. The next scene we go to Washington, D.C. There, again and again Chang-ho is called by Yohwan, and Chang-ho was very disappointed with yesterday's incident, but Yohwan asks him not to talk about it. But Yohwan wants to know where the best route is to Korea. Then Chang-ho says that he asked for Yohwan's belongings to be sent to Puerto Rico, because the road through Brazil is no longer possible. And here he says that there is a cargo ship carrying relief goods from Suriname to Puerto Rico, then packed on a plane that was going to fly to the United States troops in Korea. But the problem was this plane would depart in another 2 weeks. They didn't have much time to do everything, but with the exclusive rights that Yohwan had, he are ready to do this. But suddenly, David whispered something that made Yohwan suspicious with Ingu again, that Puerto Rico was the territory of the United States, and told Chang-ho that they did not want to enter the territory of the United States. Here, Chang-ho assured them that Puerto Rico is not part of the United States of America. This can be seen at the baseball match where we know Yohwan really likes the sport. Then Yohwan says that Chang-ho has to find another route because of money. Drugs not allowed to deal in the United States. Yohwan will look for a return route. But Chang-ho is angry because his business dealings with Yohwan are very unprofessional, and he will cancel the business with him until Yohwan decides not to doing business with Sangman anymore. Shortly, Ingu calls Chang-ho. If his suspicions are correct, Chang-ho's plan will surely fail. Chang-ho is asked to be patient with people like Yohwan and not to force his wants. Suddenly, there is a child asked Ingu to save her from this place. Then Ingu calls Chang-ho again. He tells him why didn't the International Intelligence Security Organization just kill Yohwan? Without bothering to do this, the International Intelligence Security is not allowed to kill people, but unofficially Ingu will do it, but Chang-ho asks to catch Yohwan alive and be tried in court. In the morning, David said that Yohwan's group had been trying to increase the amounts of exports to Europe, and unloading 1.9 tons would take about a year, and Yohwan suggested selling it to the European Mafia. David had done this by giving an offer, but the delivery contract is immediately taken care of by the cartel. Yohwan's problems are now increasing after the Colombian side found out about what happened in Brazil and immediately asked about their money. Then Yohwan quickly had a dirty plan to finish everything. Then Chang-ho told this to Ingu. Is it true that Yohwan is looking for another route? And he also saw that Yohwan was leaving complete with his troops. Ingu follows where Yohwan's group is going and turns out he's headed to Chinatown to meet with Shenzhen. Then the scene shows Johan asking about an offer to Shenzhen. It turns out that the offer is Johan asking the methamphetamine network in Europe to exchange it by selling cocaine within 1 month. If Johan's cocaine is not sold for 1 month, then Johan's life is threatened by the cartel. Johan will give $7 million for 3 times a month to Shenzhen, but it seems Shenzhen prefers to see Johan die and he can take over the cocaine business in Suriname, but Johan reiterates that Shenzhen can't take over the cocaine business from him, because the president and the Colombian people won't trust him other than Johan. And Johan emphasized again to Shenzhen with an offer before, did he want to help him or could he only sell methamphetamine in Suriname? Hearing this, Shenzhen then agreed, but with one condition: Johan must kill one of his people who had betrayed him, and Johan will get Shenzhen's full trust or he will give Bayan Khitay back to him. Shortly after Johan arrived at his house, they were worried about his offer to Shenzhen because it could help him become more developed from him. Here, David said after this business was finished, Johan was asked to continue or end the collaboration with Shenzhen. Of course, Johan decides, but Bayan Khitay now says that working with Shenzhen will be dangerous for them and prefers Puerto Rico. But the two of them return to giving their decision to Johan, because if it's profitable for him, then they both will go with him. After that, Johan asked to speak with David, only them both, and here David assured that if Johan could sell all the cocaine, then his cocaine empire could be realized. On the other side, Ingu is already in Chinatown to meet with Shenzhen, because if they work together then Chang Ho's plan won't work. Here Chang Ho tells Ingu to go to the US Embassy, but if Ingu disappeared suddenly, so he was sure that Ingu was the one who had betrayed him, and that it would also affect his family in Korea. Then quickly Chang Ho ordered Ingu to influence Johan so that he doesn't cooperate with Shenzhen. For this matter Ingu is asked to trust him, because if this plan fails, Chang Ho will trust all of Ingu's plans in the future. Then, here, Ingu bribes one of Shenzhen's men by saying if he meets Shenzhen, then he must immediately contact him. Next, Ingu meets Johan by preparing 2 plans, namely Chang Ho's plan and Ingu's plan, which will kill Johan directly. Ingu starts with a chat that Johan must make his choice right now, but Johan casually told about Pablo Escobar, who was very rich and nicknamed the Drug Lord, until he ended up being shot and dead after trying to escape from the pursuit of the United States DEA. Therefore, Johan promised the president of Suriname that he would never do business with United States people. But Puerto Rico is not the United States, he is just passing through. However, the cartel will never stay put with that, and Ingu is asked to be patient because he is considering all the possibilities. But suddenly, now Ingu is taken to a room and suddenly there is a message that Shenzhen is now in a hot pot restaurant. Then Ingu tells Chang Ho that talking to Johan is futile. He will do in his own way. Ingu asked permission to go to the hospital because of the injuries he had experienced, but Ingu was already at a restaurant to meet with Shenzhen. When he met Shenzhen, Ingu said, will Shenzhen team up with Johan just because of Bayan Khitay? Shenzhen emphasized that Bayan Khitay is the source of trouble. He knows the weakness of the Shenzhen group, but Johan will do anything just for money, and the fate of the Shenzhen group is not his priority. In other words, Johan will kill him after this business is over, because Johan already knows where Shenzhen's best route is and he will become bigger than the cartel in Colombia. Outside, Ingu gave a photo to Shenzhen where the photo already knew by Shenzhen, and he asked Ingu where's that location. Lots of soldiers guarding him. That's what makes Johan create his own empire and get rid of people he doesn't need. Here Ingu gives 2 options. The first is Shenzhen selling cocaine with Johan and after that he will be killed, or the second option, the two of them make plans to kill Johan and take over the kingdom with him. It's all not as easy as what Ingu thinks, because if they have killed Johan, then what about the president of Suriname and cartel? Will the two of them be able to help later? By showing a watch that President Delano gave him, it already shows the meaning of friendship with him. Meanwhile, with the cartel, everyone will trust each other if the business is about money. In other words, they can bribe the president in Colombia with a box of dollar bills. Then suddenly a member of Shenzhen gives a call from David saying that they will hand over Bayan Khitay to him. Hearing everything made Shenzhen's mind hesitate to choose Ingu or David's choice. With doubts about Ingu's plan made Chang Ho curious and unsure that the plan would going very well. Ingu convinced him that Chang Ho had to trust him because all of this was already determined by Chang Ho. Here Ingu orders Chang Ho to track down Johan's whereabouts, and in shortly, they are ready with Ingu's plan. Chang Ho complied with Ingu's plan by tracking Johan's whereabouts and making sure to ask for cooperation with the United States Embassy there. Kang Ingu told Shenzhen that they were all ready and just waiting for Shenzhen to kill him. From a distance, Bayan Khitay gave an information to Johan that Shenzhen members had just left Chinatown. On the other side, David was preparing to exchange cocaine with Bayan Khitay, and suddenly it was all a trap from Shenzhen, because they all had mastered the place where Johan was, and immediately started with the action. Finally, Yohwan was able to escape but not with the cocaine, and Ingu immediately ordered Chinjin to hide everything, but not with Ingu's safety, whose life was currently being threatened by Yohwan's members, but unexpectedly Ingu decides to return to Yohwan again. After meeting with David, he was sure that the Chinjin members were told by Ingu about where the location of the cocaine was, but Ingu only said that all this time he didn't know the location because his members were blindfolded by their members. Suddenly Yohwan came with the aim of proving who the person who has betrayed him. Here, Yohwan has asked for help from Sang Jun to check everything, of all members including Kang Ingu, and surprisingly Yohwan kills David, who turns out to be the traitor with him. The reason Yohwan killed David, because David had collaborated with Chinjin to kill him. That's all Yohwan knew from a telephone that was in the trunk of the car, but Yohwan was sure that there was still one more person controlling Chinjin, Ingu, here to make sure that the Puerto Rico route is the right route for him, but all of Yohwan's cocaine has now been taken over by Chinjin. With Ingu's plan, he orders Bayan Kite to look for the item with help from the Chinese in Chinatown. Then Kang Ingu went to Chinatown alone to find where the cocaine was, but now only the Chinese can enter there. That's because Chinzen knows that Yohwan's members will follow him and keep the cocaine's whereabouts secret. It's from Ingu, because it will affect him as long as Yohwan is still alive. He asks Ingu to find out how to kill Yohwan this time. Sure enough, it turns out that Sang Jun has been following Kang Ingu all this time. After arriving at the car park, Ingu realized that all this time he had been followed by members of Yohwan, and suddenly Bayan Kite came, and it turned out that he was Chanho's caller, who was a member of International Intelligence Security, which made Ingu must be able to work with him. Bayan Kite tells him not to act that Chanho shouldn't have planned, and it turns out that it was Bayo Kente who ordered Yohwan to kill someone else for Kang Ingu's safety. Bayan Kite is currently ordered by Yohwan to look for the whereabouts of his cocaine in Chinatown through the Chinese, and he realizes that all this time Chinjin is still communicating with Kang Ingu. While at the Surinamese presidential palace, Yohwan comes to ask him to send his troops to Chinatown on the promise that Yohwan will help him to make him to be a president again in the second round. Yohwan also asks to make Bayan Kite the new leader of Chinatown, because he knows the Chinese community very well there. He is also a Chinese Korean. Delano will send some people there, but in a loud tone Yohwan asks that Delano has to be quicker on this matter, because sooner or later the lives of both of them will be at stake. Yohwan reiterated, what he wanted was not to kill people in Chinatown but to replace their leader with someone who was more useful to him, with an income of $1 million per month for Delano. Because he had money problems, Delano immediately called General Hang and told him to prepare his troops to go to Chinatown, and finally all troops were mobilized to destroy Chinatown. All the military forces ordered civilians to enter the house because they would eradicate all the gangsters who were involved in murder and drugs. Chinjin was cornered, and Kang Ingu would get Chinjin out of there. Meanwhile, Ingu now is along with Bayan Kite. But, after Bayan Kite met him, he immediately killed Chinjin. After that incident, President Delano said that all the gangsters in Chinatown had destroyed them. They were also the ones who had caused problems at the Brazilian border. With this, the name of President Delano became the world's spotlight because he could eradicate all drug crimes in the country of Suriname. Then Kang Ingu and Bayan Kite had found the whereabouts of the cocaine they had been looking for. Then at Yohwan's residence he looked very happy because all his plans went perfectly. He also knew that Kang Ingu had helped him kill Chinjin. Even though he knew that Yohwan had disappointed him a lot, he still persisted. Here Bayan Kite also said that because of that incident he couldn't help much to sell his cocaine, because Bayan Kite needed 3 or 4 weeks to sell it, using that route. Suddenly Ingu calls Sangman saying that Yohwan will talk to him. It turns out he immediately agrees with his plan to send cocaine via the Puerto Rico route, and invites him to work together, but he made sure that Ingu came with his things, so he came home with money to Yohwan. Hearing this, Yohwan agreed with everything. He only needed 3 hours to arrange everything. Even with that offer Chanho agreed. Then the scene shows Ingu's dream where he sees his wife and child die because Yohwan's disappointment with him. From that dream makes Ingu worry about what he has been doing all this time. Then at Chanho's headquarters they are preparing all the plans to catch Yohwan. They must be in Paramaribo. Then after the cocaine is in the United States, they are required to infiltrate the forest area to the northwest of Yohwan's residence. Once they are safe must catch the main target, namely Yohwan alive. He must be tried in the courts of the United States and South Korea. There the troops at the DEA tried to find out about the opponents they would face, and Chanho also reminded that there was an international intelligence security person there who had infiltrated Yohwan's organization to become his confidant, and Chanho also had an informant, namely Kang Ingu. Time is getting closer. That makes Ingu give the news of his return to his family in Korea, where his family is waiting for him to come home. Shortly, the plan was ready to start. Chang-ho made sure that the plan would start when the plane carrying the cocaine arrived in Puerto Rico, so all his troops were asked to get ready. Kang In-gu has to go with Yo-won's group, and after that he has to leave Puerto Rico and Suriname immediately. While on the way, In-gu opened the car window to see so many cocaine plants belonging to Yo-won there, but on the other side, now Chang-ho is in trouble because he can't get money from someone, because they ask for collateral for things. Chang-ho asked his director for help to guarantee everything, because soon, Chang-ho would arrest Yo-won in Suriname, with the help of the DEA. Finally Chang-ho's director gave him bail. Then Sang-jun gave the news that soon the plane would be ready and Yo-won told him to put his stuff on the plane. Suddenly, Sang-man called In-gu who said that everything was ready and just waiting to send where's the location in time. Now he is ready to fly to Puerto Rico. 1 p.m. Eastern Time is the time when they will have their meeting, at the location of runway 3 of Puerto Rico Airport. Shortly, they were already at the airport in Puerto Rico, which left only about 2 hours before the operation began, while in Suriname, their group prepared Kang In-gu to leave immediately with all his cocaine, and returned home with money from Sang-man. But before leaving, Yo-won said that after this business was over, he had to stay with him in Suriname. Then In-gu was also not allowed to leave, but Yo-won's member who would replace him, namely Sang-jun, heard all that. In-gu asked for time to call Sang-man, which basically Chang-ho allows it, but later after In-gu will be given information back by him. On the other side, Bayan Kite, who was with Yo-won and In-gu, couldn't do anything. He could only help give news to Chang-ho by his phone. On the way, the plane will arrive in about 15 minutes to Puerto Rico, and at Yo-won's residence, Bayan Kite orders In-gu to go to the United States Embassy. After he diverts the situation, and suddenly Yo-won comes, he confused because he saw In-gu's closeness to Bayan Kite. Are they have already be friends each other? After getting instructions from Bayan Kite, In-gu immediately sabotaged all of Yo-won's cars, but suddenly 2 of Yo-won's guards came, and In-gu was still able to handle it. At the airport, Sang-young had arrived with all the cocaine ordered by Chang-ho. Here he made sure that Chang-ho brought all the money requested by Yo-won, but Chang-ho said that at this place there would be big problems bringing all the money to here. He suggested somewhere that Chang-ho had prepared, because all the plans changed. The DEA group decided that there would be a shootout between Sang-young's group and the DEA. And after seeing the money, suddenly, because of that incident, all DEA groups will head to Suriname. That's because Yo-won has been doing cocaine business in the United States. 40 minutes to Suriname. Then at Yo-won's residence, he is very anxious waiting for news from Sang-young, until he called him to make sure that he was okay, but his calls have not been answered by Sang-young. But on the other side, Sang-young was asked to lie to Yo-won, and in exchange he will be given a 10-year prison sentence in Korea, not imprisoned in the United States, which is a life sentence. And it turns out that Sang-young has now betrayed Yo-won by saying that the operation went well. Quickly, to ensure In-gu's safety, he prepared a weapon, and also Bayan Kite did that. While they still have to take 10 minutes to go to Suriname, but on the sidelines of Yo-won's chat, and In-gu asks what In-gu will do with Sang-man in Puerto Rico? Because so far, Sang-young does not drink alcohol, and Yo-won knows that Sang-man has taken Sang-young as hostage. Hearing everything, In-gu just said that Yo-won wanted to make sure everything. Why didn't he contact the captain of the plane? Then President Delano called him with information that the captain of the safety army plane had no problems at all. Everything went very well. But trouble returns to Chang-ho's group because the fighter planes are ready to shoot down their plane. If Chang-ho's group doesn't provide a flight identification number, then the DEA captain quickly says that this is a DEA group aiming to catch a drug lord in Suriname. Now only 4 minutes left to Suriname, and finally Yo-won also knows that Delano said that the Air Force informed that the DEA group crossed the Suriname border, which means Yo-won has violated the rules because he has sold cocaine in the United States. And this is what happened when Yo-won orders Delano to shoot the United States troops with Surinamese troops.
5 more men approaching from 3 o'clock.
Then now the problem is Bayan Kite has to defeat Yo-won's main bodyguard with the leg that Yo-won had shot. Unfortunately, Yo-won's group couldn't go because all the cars had been turned off by In-gu at that time, but 2 cars. It turns out that In-gu forgot to turn off the car. In the end, Bayan Kite survived the fight, but not Yo-won's group, who managed to escape, but they were still followed by In-gu. Yo-won again and again able to get away, but suddenly In-gu came crashing into him. Now Yo-won no longer has guards. Finally Yo-won is defeated by Kang In-gu. DEA troops came, but Yo-hwan said that he was just a pastor, but Chang-ho came on time and introduced himself that he was a member of international intelligence security. Here, Chang-ho said that Yo-hwan had done drug trafficking and murder. Yo-hwan was arrested and will soon be tried in courts in the United States and South Korea. While on the plane, Captain DEA said he would investigate the cartel, then would send Yo-hwan to Korea after the problem with the cartel was over. Thanks to all of Kang In-goo's help, the process of catching the biggest drug lord in Korea was successful. Shortly, Kang In-goo came home and saw that his family was fine. Then after 6 months after the incident, In-goo's activities were running normally. Again, he was still working at his garage, and suddenly Chang-ho came to meet him to give him 2 karaoke bars in Wajongbu, because he couldn't give the money he had promised before, but In-goo, who knew about it, refused to accept the gift from Chang-ho, because In-goo now would no longer have anything to do with such a world. In the last scene, Chang-ho said that he met Yo-hwan yesterday, because Yo-hwan was only sentenced to 10 years. He also asked In-goo to return his item, which was a signed pattern, and the movie is end.